All politics is identity politics. Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm DeAnna, and I got to start out with something that I've been obsessing about all day. You have no idea how much I hate myself for this, falling for, if not quite boomer slop, something close to it. So, this was the image that was being passed around yesterday after the conviction of the murderer of Henry Nowak, and I idiotically used it as an example, thinking it was simply an enhanced still from that video. You've seen this everywhere. Now, obviously not. Look at the handcuffs. Sadly, the fake nails in the upper right that look kind of like a claw. That's actually plausible enough considering the female cops we have running around, but that's fake too. This is someone using AI to upscale a real image, and in so doing, distorting it to the point that you can call it fake, especially with the nails. That said, it's not based on just nothing. Here's the real still, which you can obviously see it is totally based on. Not that different. Except for the nails. Notice the paleness of Henry Nowak's hand, though. And this is the thing that should really give us pause. This is just straight from the video. This is straight from the police. Look how pale that hand is. The handcuffs actually are kind of weird looking, even in reality. And the real image, frankly, is just as compelling, if not more so. And there's a lesson here. Just stick with using that. We don't need to upscale the truth when the truth itself is so bracing. And yes, I realize this is a bit of a cope, but if there's one thing about images, and this is why I distrust them by themselves, they tell a whole story beyond what's contained in the picture itself. They necessarily allow people to assign their own meanings, insert their own narratives about it. This is basically what the postmodern condition is. This is what we mean when we say an image can be truer than true. Now, a lot of times this can also just be a lie. And it doesn't even need to just be an image, but something like a slogan or an anecdote. Think of something like hands up, don't shoot. It was a total lie. Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri never said that. Even Barack Obama's Department of Justice figured out that the shooting was justified. But blacks felt like this was a real thing that reflected their experience, and they mobilized. Hands up, don't shoot. It's not true, but it's powerful. And because it's powerful, we all had to deal with it. Of course, what this actually shows is that blacks' experience of everyday reality and how you are supposed to behave in society is wildly different than the world which actually exists, which is another reason why diversity can never work. We're just not operating off the same model of reality. So how can we work together in the same country or pretend we share the same identity? Obviously, we can't. But with the death of Henry Nowak, we have what is essentially the culmination of decades of anti-white discrimination, two-tier policing, forced demographic change that was specifically rejected by the British people every time they had the chance to speak out on it. And that's why you're seeing such a strong reaction right now. Now, how did we end up here? How did we even get this diversity? Well, one of the most important articles ever written, and keep this one in your arsenal if you don't already know about it, comes from The Telegraph in 2009. This is extremely important if you don't already know about this. The headline was, Labour wanted mass immigration to make UK more multicultural, said former advisor. Remember, though non-white immigration to England started with Windrush after World War II, the real drive to make Britain non-white gained speed with Tony Blair. So this was his administration. This from The Telegraph, quote, the huge increases in migrants over the last decade were partly due to a politically motivated attempt by ministers to radically change the country and rub the right's nose in diversity, according to Andrew Nether, a former advisor to Tony Blair, Jack Straw, and David Blunkett. He said Labour's relaxation of controls was a deliberate plan to open up the UK to mass migration, but that ministers were nervous and reluctant to discuss such a move publicly for fear it would alienate its core working class vote. As a result, the public argument for immigration concentrated instead on the economic benefits and need for more migrants, unquote. Again, it was deliberate. It was a plan. It didn't just happen. They did this on purpose. Now think about this for a second here. Does this match with the reality, the idea of abandoning the working class vote? Yeah, the white working class is no longer the core vote for Labour, just like the white working class is no longer the core vote for Democrats in the United States, just like the white working class is no longer the core vote for the socialists in France or anywhere else. They basically ditched their core voters and they said, no, this is for the economy. We need workers. In fact, we need different workers. Our workers aren't good enough. And what do you get as a cultural consequence as a result? This is important. Politicians on the left used to pay tribute to the workers if only because they needed them, but now you don't need them anymore. So what do you get? This is where it comes from. You get this scorn and contempt and even hatred for the white working class in every Western country. White working class people are the one group you are allowed to just openly despise. You can build a whole career on it. They are the one group whose collective grievances and problems you are not supposed to treat with sympathy or understanding. You're just supposed to fear and loathe these people and figure out ways to crush them because they've got it covered. And now think of it in terms of the United Kingdom, where people always talk about class, and the class system still exists. Well, who has paid the price for mass immigration? The white working class. Whose neighborhoods and cities have been taken away? Whose daughters were groomed, sexually assaulted, raped, murdered on a mass scale, and then contemptuously ignored by the very labor counselors they had elected? Or the journalists who love to brag about how they're supporting the working class and opposing capitalism and everything else? Who are the people who are called the gammon, which essentially means pigs, by the urban strivers who dream of a government job or working for an NGO or getting a sinecure in academia or journalism? They're getting off on the fact that you are making the white working class suffer. That's practically the whole point of leftism now. That's why you do it. It is fun to have someone you can blame for social problems. It is fun to have someone you can openly hate and use state power to crush. That's why they do it. That's why the left exists at this point. That's all it is. Now, I'm not letting the right off the hook, because it was the conservatives, not just in the UK, but everywhere, who also enabled this process. And if you want to get technical without getting lost in the weeds here, you could argue that it was Republican President George H.W. Bush who caused most of our current immigration problems with the act he signed into law, which prompted family unification and chain migration and all these other things we deal with now. Hart-Celler was just the beginning. He was the one who actually made it much worse. And there is a major problem which, if you're on the right, and I am, and I assume you are too, we're going to have to deal with at some point, which is that if your ideology is built on economic self-interest and free markets and individualism and all this kind of stuff, you are always going to have people demanding cheap labor and saying, screw the nation, what matters is short-term economic gain. And it doesn't even help the economy in the long run, by the way, but no one would deny that you can make money off this kind of thing, especially when the taxpayers are essentially subsidizing your cheap labor. It's expensive for the country, but it's cheap for you. But who is more dangerous here? Because really, we're talking about the difference between greed and hatred. It's the difference between short-sightedness and lingering malice, long-term malice. Capital is a coward. You can impose conditions on business, they'll give into it. Economic man will seek to get by under any system. They don't want to wield power the same way. The left, say what you will about him, but Curtis Yarvin was right when he said the right cares about power the way a wine snob cares about alcohol, whereas the left cares about it the way an alcoholic cares about alcohol. You are dealing with an existential enemy. You are not dealing with a problem that can be managed or people that will bend the knee in the end. You have to just crush them. To return to the Telegraph, critics said the revelations showed a conspiracy within government to impose mass immigration for cynical political reasons. Mr. Nether was a speechwriter who worked in Downing Street for Tony Blair and in the Home Office for Jack Straw and David Blunkett in the early 2000s. Writing in the Evening Standard, he revealed the major shift in immigration policy came after the publication of a policy paper from the Performance and Innovation Unit, a Downing Street think tank based in the Cabinet Office in 2001. He wrote a major speech for Barbara Roche, the then immigration minister, in 2000, which was largely based on drafts of the report. He said the final published version of the report promoted the labor market case for immigration, but unpublished versions contained additional reasons, he said. He wrote, earlier drafts I saw also included a driving political purpose, that mass immigration was the way the government was going to make the UK truly multicultural. I remember coming away from some discussions with the clear sense that the policy was intended, even if this wasn't its main purpose, to rub the right's nose in diversity and render their arguments out of date, unquote. And that's just it. Diversity is a final solution for the white problem. The left will never forgive the white working class for not going along with their revolution, for their stubborn attachments to tradition and patriotism and Christianity. What was it that Barack Obama famously said about middle America? Clinging to their guns and religion? That's always what it's been about. But if you can outnumber these people, if you can outnumber these white peasants, you don't have to consider their arguments anymore. In fact, you don't have to consider arguments at all. It doesn't matter how incompetent you are. It doesn't matter if your rule objectively makes things worse. I mean, the ANC is not getting driven out of power in South Africa anytime soon. Even if the power grid fails entirely, they get to rule. And if they are somehow driven out of power, they're going to be replaced by somebody worse, somebody to their left who's going to say, oh, they didn't do enough to confront the legacy of apartheid or something like that. And you always need a scapegoat. You always need kulaks. You always need the people you were allowed to go after, to purge, to blame, to wipe out, and to feel really good about punishing. What is the most common thing progressives in America say these days? We made a big problem in not killing all the white Confederates after the Civil War. Reconstruction should have been a million times harder. They're not talking about the Old South, they're talking about you. And what do they say we need to do after Trump now? We need to demogify America just like Germany denazified. And I'm not just coming up with this out of whole cloth. For example, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner in economics, professor of economics at the City University of New York, and of course the man who famously predicted that by 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines. Our intellectual and moral superiors, right? Anyway, this is what he had to say.
We need to defang Trump as much as possible and make sure that neither he nor anybody who follows in his footsteps has power after the next two elections. But beyond that, we really need to do a thorough purging of the United States. We need a demogification, and that is, I'm not going over the top by using a word that's very similar to the denazification that we pursued successfully after World War II in Germany.
This is what they want for us. Now, until recently, I would have said that the most beaten down and repressed country in the West is Germany. And if you've been there, as I have recently, everywhere you go, there's some monument to shame. All the public buildings and statues and everything else have some plaques screaming at you about how your history is long, long nightmare. Germany itself is somehow illegitimate. You should hate yourself, and that's moral and good. And of course, even though they say Germany is multiracial and multicultural these days, this is entirely directed at the actual German population, which is to say, the white population. Martin Sellner has this great line when he says the response to someone who says, well, who is actually German? The answer is whoever is supposed to feel shame about their history. Well, this is what they want for America. The Washington Post a few years ago published an article arguing for this very thing. The author was someone named Michelle Norris, formerly at the Washington Post, now at MS Now, which was formerly MSNBC, black woman journalist. You already know everything she's ever thought, said, felt, wrote. And what did she say? This is the America she wants. Quote, imagine traveling through an American state and coming upon small, embedded memorials that listed key facts about the lives of the enslaved, their names, their fates, their birth dates, the number of times they were sold, the ways they were separated from their families, the conditions of their toil. Imagine how that might shape the way we comprehend the peculiar institution of slavery, its legacy, and its normalized trauma. Imagine if there were similar embedded memorials for indigenous peoples who were forced from their land, relegated to reservations far from their normal ranges and regions. Imagine stopping to fill up the tank at a roadside gas station and noticing the reflection off a gleaming brass marker that bears the names of the tribal elders who once lived where you are standing, unquote. Now, this is not a drive to unify. This is not a new form of patriotism. This is not even really left-wing. It's just a celebration of ethnic pride and chauvinism for the groups she likes, whipping up resentment and anger against whites. And why? Because anger and resentment among tribal groups is how you get things done in a democracy. That's what it is. That's how the system works. But whites don't get anything from this. And no one believes that this system, which is what rules Germany today, has made Germany stronger. No one believes that. Just look at it. The country is completely on the brink. And the propaganda is the same everywhere in the West. Oh, immigrants built America. Well, maybe for America that's true. No, they say the same thing about Germany, even though it's obviously false. So take a look at this video from Remix, some Arab in Germany bragging that he doesn't care about Germany and everything worth building in Germany was built by Arabs. And again, at the same time, you have to pretend that this guy's German. And if you don't, the German government will punish you. Take a look.
Wie zufrieden bist du in Deutschland?
Wallah null, yani. Hier ist ein Beweis,
Die haben einen neuen Parkplatz gemacht in Maizal. Maizal gehört uns, tamam. Gehört Ausländer. Die kommen hier, die packen unsere Jungs und so, die tun auf cool und so. Aber wenn 1 gegen 1 haben wir keine Chance.
Okay, würdest du für Deutschland kämpfen?
Wallah, ich will für Deutschland nichts machen, Janne. Nichts machen. Nur eine deutsche Frau heiraten, deutscher Pass, danach fertig.
Woher kommst du?
Ich komme aus Kurdistan. In Deutschland, ich mache in Deutschland Geld. Die können mich nicht abschieben. Ich habe kein Land, die können mich nicht abschieben.
Du willst auch nicht eine deutsche Frau haben. Okay, was sagst du zur Remigration?
Was ist das?
Ja, das ist richtige Kämpfen, wenn deutsche Frau. Ja. Das ist so, wenn die Leute sagen, Ausländer raus. Was sagst du zu denen?
Ausländer rein, Deutsche raus, weil, guck mal, nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg, wenn der Ausländer nicht da wäre, Deutschland wäre so wie ein Dings, Schweiz oder so. Siehst du diese Gebäude? Das haben nur ein Dings gebaut, ein Araber, die haben viele.
Dieser Loch?
Ja, dieser Loch hat Araber gebaut, alle viele. Hier waren nur 2, 3 deutsche Mitarbeiter, der Rest war Ausländer. Die haben alles hier gebaut. Deutschland gehört uns.
Can't go on like this. And I know I've talked about this article before, but this is the model. Germany is what they want for the entire West. And you have to pay attention to this. But of course, Germany is waking up. And as it wakes up, you're going to see more overt repression in response. This is why in Germany they are entertaining measures like banning the Alternative for Germany, not despite the fact that it's the most popular party in vast parts of the country, but because it's the most popular party. And we definitely see this happening in the United Kingdom today. I mean, real repression, what does that mean? It's not just when you can't express your grievances, you aren't even allowed to feel angry about them. That's the case now with the reaction to the death of Henry Noack and the murder conviction that just occurred. So Nigel Farage, we talked about this a bit yesterday, called for the British population to react with rage. And Prime Minister Keir Starmer, with that permanently suffering and simpering expression he always has, it makes me want to throw up, takes to the air to shame them.
I think Nigel Farage's reaction is the wrong reaction. And I start my answer to your question through the eyes of the family. They have said they do not want this whipped up. They have been through the most extraordinary, awful experience. They don't want this whipped up. And Nigel Farage is completely wrong to use this to try and create division. He would be wrong in any circumstances. But when Henry's family are saying, please don't do that, it's our son, then really, as politicians, as human beings, we should start where they start. And that's where I start.
How interesting what you're supposed to feel angry about, what you're allowed to feel angry about. How interesting what has social importance and what does not. I mean, Great Britain went nuts over the George Floyd case, something that happened in another country, and a narrative built on lies, by the way, and that was used to take sweeping action, criminal action even, destroying statues and such, rioting. But this something happened in your own country, that's just a minor little tragedy. Oh, well, the state killed this kid, yeah, but it's not a big deal. Let the family mourn in peace. You're the one causing the problems, paying attention to it. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Don't look back in anger. And you hear that phrase all the time, right? Don't look back in anger. A lot of Americans are probably, what does that refer to? Well, it comes from the response to the Manchester Arena bombing in 2017. 22 people were killed, and you had the little state-coordinated official mourning rituals, the moment of silence, the little vigils, nothing actually religious or meaningful, of course, because that would be divisive. We don't want to upset the Muslims who actually bombed the place. And then everybody in Manchester sang this stupid pop song from Oasis, Don't Look Back in Anger. And the journalists clapped their little soft hands and called it an expression of the spirit of Manchester. This from The Guardian. Don't look back in anger becomes symbol of Manchester's spirit, according to The Guardian. Yeah, the spirit of surrender, the spirit of defeat, the spirit of there's nothing you can do. And I am not shaming the people of Manchester or Britain for this, because no one is rising up against what's being done to us. Not really. All of us are like this. All of us, myself included, are convicted of cowardice. Everyone, with a few honorable exceptions, buckles under. People never quite rise up, do they? And how can you expect them to? You have this vast cultural and intellectual and even moral and spiritual apparatus that infects us with guilt and self-hatred throughout the entire Western world. And if that fails, you just have naked repression, especially in Europe. People being locked up for having the wrong books, posting the wrong things, saying the wrong things. Hell, if we want to look at the case of Dries van Langenhoven in Belgium, sentenced to prison for saying truthful things that other people might use to feel the wrong things. This is where we are at. And so it is very understandable that no one wants to be the first up, because when someone does put their head up, even a little bit, they make an example out of him to encourage the others, as they say, which means really everything we talk about, everything we organize for, everything we strategize about, and all the rest, it comes down to one question. We all know the problems, we all know the solutions, but how can we actually have the solidarity and support structures so people actually can rise up and do something? Because until we have that, you can't be surprised people just give in and think there's no hope, which unfortunately is precisely what they want you to think. But yesterday, you did see some people rise up, at least in a way. And to hem and haw a bit, yes, I know it's American Renaissance. We do things a certain way. And obviously, this may not be the most productive way to do things. This may not be the most moral way to do things. All disclaimers taken as read. Fine. But the people are angry. And they are right to be angry. They have been betrayed by their own government to an extent that no other people in history has ever experienced. When the Mongols came to a city to conquer it and wipe out the population, they didn't have the kind of vicious, sadistic glee that the British government seems to have for its own people. And so it's not surprising that you had scenes like this.
That was completely unnecessary.
Now notice how quickly the police are willing to use violence. Why? You're allowed to attack these people. No one cares. They could have mown them down in the street. Every journalist in the country would line up to give the cops a medal. They're white. They're mostly working class. These are the people you're allowed, encouraged, practically required to hate. So you have a police officer, for example, willing to do something like kick someone in the back of the head. Now, I'm trying to be cautious here with this footage. This footage is mostly from Southampton. You had these riots yesterday, and in an age of AI and slop and everything else, yes, we need to use caveats. I don't want to fall for something again. But this was being posted everywhere. Kicking somebody in the back of the head is how you kill them, basically. And I've seen a few reports from the States where you have cops being investigated and suspended and whatever else for doing this, even in much more dangerous situations. But here, nothing. Why? You're supposed to do it. White working class guy. The dominant tone of mainstream media coverage surrounding these events is fury. Not enough was done against these protesters. Not enough is being done against someone like Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is the hard right to these people. So The Guardian, again, it's a left-wing paper, but it's pretty influential. They say, quote, 11 officers and police dog injured in terrifying violence in Southampton. Chief of Hampshire Police says those claiming to protest over murder of Henry Nowak were determined to spark fear and division. You have to love this idea that people are creating division. You're fostering division. No, the division is already there. You hear this all the time. What do they mean by this? What do they mean by division? What unity is possible? What are we supposed to unite over? What is politics other than division? Because if you don't like division, if you don't like the idea that politics should be about building coalitions for your interests to oppose the other coalitions that oppose your interests, then you don't like democracy. And yeah, I don't like democracy. I'd like something different, but I don't think journalists want that. What they really mean by you're fostering division is shut up, you stupid peasant, and do what you're told. That's what they mean by protecting democracy and building unity and working together. What they mean is we, the politicians, the journalists, the bureaucrats, the academics, the NGO workers, the mouthpieces of the system get to dictate terms, and you don't even get a say. That's what they really mean by democracy. Anyway, The Guardian. 11 officers and a police dog were injured during disorder by those claiming to protest over Henry Noack's murder, the chief of Hampshire police said, accusing those involved of being determined to spark fear and division. A trail of destruction was left on the streets of Southampton after Tuesday night's riot, with car windows smashed and bricks strewn across roads. The evening had begun relatively peacefully outside Southampton Central Police Station, but turned ugly when hundreds of people marched across the city to the neighborhood where 18-year-old Noack died and where his killer, Vikram Digwa, lived. Protesters hurled bricks, wheelie bins, bottles, and beer cans at police as officers in riot gear stopped them from reaching Digwa's family home. The chief constable of Hampshire Police, Alexis Boone, said on Wednesday 11 officers and a police dog have been injured doing their job to protect the communities that we serve. Yeah, which ones are those? What we as a society cannot accept is the violent scenes we saw in Southampton last night, unquote. Now again, all disclaimers taken as read. Not the most productive action. And again, believers in elite theory, right? I'm a believer in elite theory. An uprising like this doesn't really accomplish much by itself. How can it? You need elite support for street action to do something. That seems to be true of most revolutionary movements. But first off, it's the cops themselves that are the problem here. They are the target of the protest. That's why Henry Noack died. They actually are the focus. So who else are they supposed to protest? I mean, the murderer's in jail. And suddenly, all the narratives surrounding protests have changed. Now, suddenly, it's not riots are the cry of the unheard. Now, suddenly, it's not nonviolence is actually white supremacy, as Antifa told us all the time in 2020. Now, suddenly, it's not the privileged are not allowed to dictate to the oppressed the tools they use for liberation. Now, suddenly, we don't need to consider what the root causes are for this anger or how we can resolve the underlying grievances. We don't have to think about any of this. And my favorite, of course, now, suddenly, all lives matter. Now the left is saying this. Andrew Western, an MP from the Labour Party, of course, saying in response to those saying white lives matter, he says, all lives matter, Rob. Stop your exploitative nonsense. I remember when saying all lives matter was white supremacy. But we don't have to think about any of this stuff now. If you're the British Prime Minister, you can just respond with naked repression.
But no matter the pain we feel, there is no justification for more violence and disorder. Yeah. The attacks directed towards police officers in Southampton last night were disgraceful and completely unacceptable. Yeah. This is a time for serious work, not rage. Yeah. And let me be clear. We will ensure anyone found engaging in disorder meets the full force of the law, as we have done before.
Really, what we're talking about is whose concerns are taken seriously. Who is allowed to do these kinds of things? So, for example, UK cops, as well as Keir Starmer, as I showed you yesterday, they all took a knee for George Floyd. Doesn't matter the facts around that case, which you guys know from the interview last week about the book American Scapegoat. Doesn't matter that it didn't even happen in the United Kingdom. So it doesn't even make sense for British cops to feel bad about it. They still took the knee. They quite literally bent the knee for George Floyd. Here, you have a case where the British cops are arguably responsible for a white kid's death. You have a protest near where it actually happened. Like, they're tied to this. And again, the precedent is set. I would argue that police should not be showing solidarity with any political stance. That's how it should work, but we're past that, aren't we? That's not a thing anymore. So don't even make that argument. This is where we're at. So do they take a knee here? This would make more sense. Well,
On your knees! 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 On your fucking knees! Get on your knees! 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 On your
of course they don't take a knee. Of course. It's just their own people. Why would they care? And it only goes one way. On social media right now, Sikhs, Indians, all the rest of them are openly celebrating the murder. It's a victory. It's a good thing. They like it. This one, for example, got over 1,500 likes, and it's not alone. And it's not like these tensions are just something that happens in the United Kingdom. In France, as you may have heard recently, following a soccer game, you had the now expected ethnic riots, and it took on a very racial dimension very quickly. So I-24 reports, riots erupt across France after PSG Champions League victory. Riots broke out across France overnight after Paris Saint-Germain claimed the Champions League title for the second consecutive year, with 416 people arrested, including 280 in Paris alone. Footage circulating on social media showed rioters setting fire to and vandalizing property across the capital, while fireworks were fired directly at police officers. 7 officers were injured in the clashes. The scenes of disorder echoed previous episodes of post-match unrest in French cities following major sporting events, raising fresh questions about crowd management and public order during high-profile celebrations. Now, is this even really about soccer? You tell me. You've got scenes like this. Now, there are countless more videos like this. We could go through all of them and look at this, look at this. You have to be careful because some of these videos are not actually from the recent riots. But that's only because they're from the riots a few years ago. Like, this happens all the time now. This is just how they live. And it's always the same people. It's just a bunch of Arabs and blacks. There's no French people here. And it's not because they're Muslim. It's because they're nons. And because they're nons, they hate France. And they hate France because the French are whites. Simple as. And they regard this as conquest. And it is the French government itself which is preventing the problem from being solved. As is the case in Germany. As is the case in England. And perhaps in the United States and America. Although it's not quite as dire here on the federal level, at least for now. We'll see what happens. Go to Spain now, where the government has pushed through the legalization of hundreds of thousands of Africans and Arabs. So, of course, what do you think's going to happen? These people are now pouring in. Now, I always make fun of the idea that, like, oh, we gotta stock up because it's gonna be like a zombie movie one day. Well, okay. You tell me what came to mind when you're looking at that. That's basically a zombie movie. Really, it all just comes down to one question everywhere. And we'll talk more about the American situation tomorrow on the live stream, but frankly, you have comparable scenes in Newark, New Jersey, as you see with these protests against ICE. You have this kind of disorder everywhere. Like the cold civil war that's been brewing for a while, it's starting to go hot. It's starting to go kinetic. And you can say that this is just a question of restoring order. Patrick Casey reference. But it's not just that, right? It's a question of whose order. Because conservatives will say things like, oh, law and order. But law and order, these things are not morally or politically or racially neutral. You got plenty of law and order in the Henry Nowak case. A lot of law and order. So much order that they arrested the dying victim. You're going to get order with these protests when they use facial scans and cell phone data to hunt down protesters and give them exemplary punishments while nons are just let go. You have plenty of order in Germany for some. You have total freedom and license for others. This is only going to be settled by the use of force. Understand, this is where this is going. The current situation cannot endure. It's going to be settled by the use of force from the top down. State power. Everyone agrees on this. There is going to be a reconstruction, a reorganization, a new order. And the only thing we're fighting about now is who is going to do it. Either we take control of our governments and our states and do it ourselves, not just through remigration, but by crushing these anti-white leftists who have allowed this cancer to fester for so long and no longer letting them get away with these double standards, or it's going to be used against us. And when they do, it's going to be sold to us, as it is in England right now, as simply law and order. Business as usual, a way to avoid unpleasantness, and you will be horrified to see how many normal conservatives will go along with that narrative. The struggle is the same everywhere. The enemies are the same everywhere. The issues are the same everywhere. And the solution is the same everywhere. The solution is always power. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. My guest today, I think it's best if I let him speak for himself for a bit.
Now is not the time to seek sympathy for these people or look for empathy. Now is the time to build the hostile environment. Now is the time to say, we have had enough. This is our country. You are here as guests. You will be leaving as guests. This is not your land. You will not murder, rape, attack, assault, and pillage my land and my people anymore. You are not welcome here. I don't care if that's offensive. I don't care if that gets me in trouble. You are not welcome here. You are not welcome on our land. You are not welcome in our communities. You are not welcome within our spaces. You make us unwelcome in our own towns and cities. You segregate yourselves away, enclave yourselves, spray paint on the walls of Alum Rock, no whites allowed after 8 p.m. Fuck you. You are not welcome in our country. We don't want you here. You don't belong here. And you will be leaving our country one way or another. I make sure of that. We, as the British people, will make sure of that. You are not welcome here any longer, and we are not going to sit there and give you any more empathy, any more sympathy. You will be leaving on the next flight out of this country. We will put forward a government that makes it so you will leave, if you like it or not.
Hugh Anthony is the host of Prioritise Britain. You can find him on X at @TheHughAnthony, and his speech in the aftermath of this recent case is turning up in edits all over the place. Real pleasure to welcome to the show one of the emerging young voices of British nationalism. Check it out. Well, Hugh, thank you so much for joining us here today. And again, congratulations on the recent speech that you made about this case. I'm seeing edits of you everywhere right now, so you definitely seem to have captured the spirit of the British people right now. And boy, that spirit is pretty angry. What do you think of the reaction right now?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Kevin. And no, absolutely. What we're seeing right now is what we call the Anglo spirit. We're seeing that fire and fury that's been embedded within us for so long, but has been pushed down by the establishment, by the media, trying to tell us, no, don't look back in anger, continue to march on forward into our eternal doom. And eventually we have now got to a breaking point where the British people want no more of it. We are sick to death of being killed in our own homeland by invaders. We are sick to death of being replaced in our homeland by invaders, and continuously told that we must be tolerant and respectful of these people that simply want us dead. So frankly, the British people are mad, they're angry, and they finally had that fury inside of them to say, enough is enough. We want our country back. And I'm very glad to see it.
Why now? Because obviously, don't look back in anger. That comes from the Manchester bombing. I mean, that was 2017. I mean, it seems like, forget every year, like every 6 months, you have some like insane case. I mean, we all remember Lee Rigby. We all remember all these other cases, the grooming gangs, everything else. And they just kind of took it. And we're all familiar with the poem When the Saxon Began to Hate and everything else. But now it does seem like this is it. Like this is just snapped. And Millennial Woes was on yesterday and he said the same thing. He said like, this is a milestone. It seems like something has actually shifted in a way that it never happened before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the major contentions which has led to the position where we are now is probably the birth of a party like Restore, where now people are openly being ethno-nationalists, they're openly being tribal about things, they're openly saying, you're not British, you don't belong here. I think what we saw before was we went through Brexit, where people thought that would deal with immigration. Nothing happened through then. We went through the Southport riots. What we saw was a crackdown on our free speech. And I think people were too scared at that point to try and speak up, because you were seeing people getting lobbed in jail for a year, 2 years at a time for simply tweeting about something. So that really pushed down the ability for people to want to say something. But what I think you're seeing now, especially since the birth of Restore and the rise of people like me and Steve Laws in British politics, where we are quite openly saying, you don't belong here, get out of my country, in the most brazen terms way, more people are now getting the balls and getting the fire enough to stand up side by side with us and say, yeah, no, we completely agree. Every single one of you has to leave. We've had these conversations about illegals for as long as I can remember, nearly over a decade now. And what people are now finally starting to say is, well, hold on a minute. The Manchester Arena bombing, that wasn't an illegal migrant. The Rotherham rape gangs, that was not illegal migrants. Henry Novak's killer, that was not illegal migrants. These are legal migrants that have been born into our system that do not belong here, will never belong here, and will never be the same as us. So people are beginning to finally break past this curse of thinking everybody's British and recognizing exactly who are the British people, and we are the British people.
Yeah, the reporters always do this thing like, well, actually, Chud, this guy was a legal resident or a British citizen. It's like they think that's an own. It's like, no, that makes it 100 times worse. that means we have to do so much more. You have no idea like what is required, because at this point, we're so far past the ideas of civic nationalism and legality and everything else. But at the same time, I mean, people go at their own pace, so to speak. And so it seems to me that Nigel Farage has kind of rather unexpectedly put himself at the forefront of the anger right now. I mean, opportunistically, probably, but he is saying a lot of things that I think Nigel Farage himself would have condemned a few years ago. We all know Farage. We all know his deal. We all know how he operates. But what's your take on how Reform is operating right now, specifically its leader?
Yeah, well, Nigel Farage is a snake oil salesman. Like, he always will try and put himself in a position where he can gain publicity and public support behind these things. And now he's speaking up about young white men. I mean, this is the same man that has said that English does not really matter. He's not asked about what makes a British person. However, you know, he's fine with the Jews having Israel. He's made that very clear. But this is the same man that's quite openly said he does not actually care about what it is to be British or English. He only cares about who has citizenship here. I mean, it was only 2 years ago he was saying that anybody that was born in Wales and had lived there for 5 years was a Welshman, which would have made Axel Brudabakana Welsh. And frankly, that's ridiculous. So I think what he's doing is jumping on the bandwagon. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think one of the big reasons is the rise of Restore. They do see them as the biggest enemy to Reform currently. And secondly, the by-election that we currently find ourselves in, where if Reform can push themselves to come across like they are this severe opposition that are looking out now for the native Brits, even though we know they're not, that will help gather a lot of this tribal support that has been building, especially in a lot of these localized community elections. It's like we saw with the Great Yarmouth elections. If they can build up that support and that tribalism, I think Farage thinks he can win with that.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a real danger that Restore is being outflanked here? I mean, because it does seem like Farage is getting what he wanted, because I saw him in Parliament today where he's talking about two-tier policing and everything else, and everyone's saying, oh, like, Nigel Farage, you're responsible for this violence. You told people to trigger rage and everything else. I mean, if you're him, you want to be the target. You want to be the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, like Farage has always excelled at being the target. I mean, he was known as the Brexit man because he would stand up in the European Parliament and quite literally say that people have the appearance of a bank clerk and the charisma of a low-grade wet cloth. And like this is what Farage does. He likes to be in the firing line. So absolutely, he's using this optimistically to do that. And I do think this is a threat to Restore. And I don't think a lot of people will be willing to say that. Now, what we've seen is Rupert Lowe come out on the side of Kemi Badenoch, who's saying, oh, I don't want to hear about White Lives Matter. Right. We need to relax. I'm like, no, we do need to hear about White Lives Matter. This is Rupert Lowe who sat there at Christmas and he made an explicit video saying to the young white men of Britain, I hear your struggle. This should be the moment where Rupert stands up and go, you know what? White lives do matter. We are seeing a systematic oppression. They are being murdered in the tens of thousands now by these foreign invaders. We've seen, he was the one that was leading the rape gang inquiries, which was little British girls that were raped by Pakistanis who were raping them for the basis that they were white. He should be standing up and doing what Farage is doing. So he is being outflanked. And instead, what we're seeing from Rupert is him talking about, oh, we'll just remove the BBC license, and oh, we'll merge in with Ben Habib, who's a half Pakistani, half Englishman that doesn't even know what a British person is. This is the wrong approach. Take the aggressive approach. We've been going on about a hostile environment. Now that came from Rupert Lowe. And I'm the one that's now parroting it. I'm like, he should be the one saying it. He should be taking that fire, that fury. If he was to do what I did yesterday, which is where I sat there and went, this is the moment to grab that fire, that fury, that drive, it could easily help him win these elections. And he's just not. And I have no idea why.
Yeah, this is the first big screw up from him that I've seen. I mean, it's the only time, frankly, since like this whole thing started where I thought like, no, because now Nigel is right where he wants to be. And the problem is we know how this movie ends, and it seems to be a problem everywhere. And it's always a very difficult question because on the one hand, you want something to actually happen. You want people to be winning elections. You want people to be in the state. You want to be politically relevant because at some point you're going to need state power to deal with all this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, how many times have we seen people come up and everybody says, this is our guy, and then it just kind of gets co-opted and it doesn't go anywhere, or it even does more harm than good. I mean, you remember the way the international media was when Meloni was elected in Italy. It's the return of fascism and everything else. And what have they gotten out of it? More immigrants. I mean, I think the problem with Farage is that it's so easy to say that if he gets in, I mean, who knows, but based on his past history, how are you not just going to end up with what you got before? I mean, look at half the people who are in reform at this point. They're not even white.
I mean, this is the crazy thing with Farage. He's literally spent his career bragging about destroying the right wing, bragging about destroying like the BNP and the actual far right and the ethno-nationalists. And now we're supposed to trust him with the safety of white people and the preservation of white people. It's a complete LARP. And the thing with Farage is he will do anything in his power to appear like he's on the right side of history. He's not on the right side of history because in reality, he's a stockbroker from Wall Street. What he's actually concerned about is his own career, his own bank account, and making as many deals with his big multimillionaire foreign friends that he can so that when he retires and has a nice pension, he can just move country and not have to look back. I mean, it was literally 2 months ago, he was at Davos with the World Economic Forum talking about how we need more Indian migrants, bearing in mind they were going on about how India's economy should reach $7 trillion by 2047. Who do you think is going to put into that? Well, of course, it's going to be the Indians that come here, biopower service-based economy, take up the jobs, and then send the money back home. And Farage knows that, but he's fine with doing that because that's where his campaign funding comes from. It comes from his big foreign friends. So if he can win an election, he knows damn well he's not going to be there for more than one term. He gets in, he has this chance to say, oh, I'm going to look after white people. And then he just brings in a bunch of Indians anyway, and we end up in the same situation.
Yeah. Do you think this is a phase that people are going to have to go through, though? Because this is something I've been talking about with a lot of people in Britain. They say, look, it's going to be reform. I mean, look at the polls. If you had a general election now, they would obviously sweep to victory. But after reform, once reform fails, which everybody assumes, then they'll go to restore. The question becomes, like, is this just a phase you have to go through, or are people going to get so burned out once reform gets in and presumably doesn't do anything that they're just going to throw up their hands and say, well, there's nothing that can be done? Or do you think, like, we could just skip that step and that there's a chance? I mean, general election is what, 2029 they can hang on to? I mean, that restore could still get the whole thing if they just adjust a little bit. I mean, the popular anger is like nothing I've ever seen in Britain before.
There's a few things I think about this. I think, number one, what you will see at the 2029 election with current trajectory is you will see a reform minority government with a coalition with the Tories. Now, if that happens, what you'll see is an absolute squashing of the right-wing nationalist scene. They will just do anything in their power to remove it and return back to the kind of like Cameron-esque government you saw in the early 2010s, which is fairly socially progressive and economically Thatcherite. So I think that's probably what you would move towards in a current scene with a general election. I think the best case scenario for restore, which I know I've not seen anybody mention right now in British politics, which I find quite bizarre, is there is no way on earth restore wins the next general election with a landslide. I know it's very optimistic to say that, and there's a lot of people that like to go, oh, we're going to win, it's going to be no problem. You're going to rely on a party that's 3 years old to win a general election in a sweep. It's just not going to happen. What the best outcome you could get for a party like Restore is to get their foot in the door. You're not going to beat Reform, but you could beat the Tories. If you can beat the Tories, you will be the person in which Reform has to build a pact with to gain power in the government, which means that they can't destroy you because your foot is in the door. I mean, a good example of that is the Liberal Democrats. Now, the Liberal Democrats were gaining quite a lot of traction in the early 2000s, and when they managed to get enough seats to become the second in command with a Tory government in 2010, it allowed them to have some form of power in government. Now, there were some cock-ups, and it led to like gay rights rights and gay marriage, which everyone was not very happy about at the time. But what you did see from that is since then, the Lib Dems have not died. Their party is still afloat, and they've continuously managed to gain at least 80 to 90 MPs in Parliament, and they're slowly building up that traction again. So even if Restore could get in, you could maybe see 30 to 40 MPs at the next election, optimistically. But those 30 to 40 could help form the next government, which can then build over the next decade. I think that's probably the best plan.
And as you point out with the Lib Dems, I mean, they're always going to be there. We can't even say that's really true of Labour or the Conservatives. I mean, that might sound a bit LARPy, but it's pretty easy to imagine a scenario where those parties just aren't a thing anymore within the decade, with Labour essentially just being eaten by the Greens, and then the Tories essentially just being eaten by Reform, and then that's it. I mean, what is the party system in Britain right now? Because it seems to me that on the left, they've gotten into the situation that I always sort of thought would happen, but now it's actually happening, where their foreign pets that they brought in to vote Labour and vote for the left aren't taking orders anymore. Now you have these independent Muslim MPs, or they're going into the Green Party, which I guess is another sort of, okay, we'll have white people and Jewish people in charge, but we'll take the Muslim votes. But they're not going to put up with that forever. I mean, eventually they're just going to do their own thing.
Well, this is what I find quite interesting. What you see on the left wing of British politics is now, naturally, Muslims are quite conservative people when it comes to their social understanding. I mean, if you look at the foundations of Islam, they are a very conservative religion. I mean, they would literally, throw gays off of buildings and beat women if they don't listen to their husband. That's not really what you would expect the Green Party to be. But they recognize that they have to work with the Green Party for the survivability of the Muslim population within Britain. What you keep seeing on the left is this coalition between factions that fundamentally hate each other. A big example, you can even see this in America, like Bernie Sanders is one of the top richest people in America by comparison to everybody else. But their policy is, tax the rich. We're going to deal with the rich. And his supporters will allow him to be rich and a millionaire and own multiple different houses because they're like, oh, he's talking our talking points. What you see here on the right is if it's not perfect, people won't support it. And I'm like, we have to form this broad coalition one way or another, or we will just be destroyed by sectarian politics and by this gay, Muslim, Jewish coalition on the left. And then it won't make a difference because the way that our politics works, it does not actually matter if you get 50% of the votes or not. As long as you get the most votes compared to everybody else, you will then have the biggest hand in power. I mean, Labour won the last election with 36% of the vote. That's just over a third of the country. But now they have a supermajority, can do whatever they want.
Yeah. And of course, they still have probably the most unpopular government in British history. I think that was from a few months ago when I saw that. But I mean, the whole Labour government just seems to be dead in the water. But again, they can just stumble on until 2029. You keep seeing these calls for Keir Starmer to resign. Why should he resign? There's no reason for him to resign. I mean, there doesn't seem to be much evidence of a rebellion within the party. They can just kind of keep going. And the ominous thing is that when you see them talking about this repression that they're going to unleash against these people who were rioting yesterday, although it was a pretty tame riot compared to some of the stuff we've seen in Britain before that the establishment tolerated. I mean, you can imagine a scenario where he just expects, look, if I can just hang on for a couple more years, Labour might be able to survive because they're going to perceive me as like the steady hand at the tiller, as opposed to the chaos that would be Farage or Restore or whoever else.
Yeah, I think there's two things that you can see with Labour at the moment. Now, number one, if Starmer can drag himself on, there is a 50-50 chance he will either help Labour appear more popular or he will drag Labour to its death. Now, I'm hoping he does the latter. The mistake that people are forgetting is his key opponent right now is Andy Burnham, who is running in this by-election that's going on. And if Andy Burnham was to win that, he would then start a leadership contest versus Starmer, and he would win the membership vote 60-30, and then he would end up going on to be Prime Minister, and he's loved up here in the north. I'm a northerner. I'm very aware of Burnham, and everybody loves him. Everybody likes a little bit of Burnham. He's known as the king of the north, and what he would do is rebuild this thing called the Red Wall, which is where you've got like predominant Labour votes that have been there for generations. He would rebuild that, and you would see the Labour Party and the Uni Party hang on, and they would be able to drag along to 2029 with a higher chance of actually winning that election. So I think that Starmer knows right now he can take that risk, and I think there's probably two things that you'll see from this. If Burnham wins, you're going to see a very tight contest, which will probably see Burnham becoming Prime Minister. If he loses and Reform wins, what you'll see is an even bigger rebellion from the backbenches of Labour. And what a lot of them have already said is we are going to move to the Green Party. And if they move to the Green Party, then you see that fracturing on the left that you're currently seeing on the right. That is the only way possible that we could end up with minority governments, which allows for no clear majority, no supermajority, to basically destroy the country from 2029. That's the best doomsday scenario we can currently imagine.
Well, certainly, it sounds like that we kind of want the doomsday scenario here, but I mean, that raises the obvious question. Is he going to win this by-election?
I think Burnham has a high chance. I mean, it was a Labour stronghold for decades, and what you saw at the local elections is Reform did sweep the council. So it has been put down to a knife's edge. Now, Burnham has multiple years in British politics and a big track record. He entered British politics in, I think it was 1997. So he's been there for a while. He's been working in the background. He's been the mayor of Manchester since 2017. He's overlooked things like the arena bombing and whatnot, and now he's actually trying to move more to a centrist position on immigration, saying that we need to cut down on immigration, we need to take a harsher stance, we need to shut down the asylum hotels. And he's trying to do that to appear as more like a Blairite centralist figure, because he knows if he does that, again, it rebuilds the uni party. So I do think that Burnham has a high chance. My key takeaway is it will depend on how well Restore does or not. If Restore does very well, then Reform may lose out on the 5-10% of the vote that they need to beat Labour. And what I am seeing from a lot of people that I know that are on the ground is Restore are doing quite well. None of them are expecting to win. Ignore what everybody is saying online. They're all lying to you. They're doing that on purpose for hopium and all that. I'll tell you the truth.
Are you suggesting that people tell lies on the internet just to get clicks?
I know. Crazy, right? Who would have guessed that? But you're seeing all these people saying, oh, we're going to win. We're going to sweep the local election. They already know they're not. Everybody knows they're not. They're aiming for third place. But third place is I'm saying, okay, great. You may knock down Reform and go, haha, look, we beat Nigel. And there's the uni party now about to strangle you to death and say, never mind, you're dead in the water anyway. So I think it depends on how well Restore does. And I think right now they are doing well enough to give Andy Burnham the keys to number 10. So I think that Labour may actually pull it ahead.
So Restore is operating as a spoiler in this case. I mean, I take it that that's not the preferred outcome if we're trying to get to minority governments in the future. But I mean, some would argue, I guess this is where how it gets complicated, and this is where we end up. I think you and I are on the same page in that we know what Nigel Farage is. We know who he always considered sort of the existential enemy. We know he cannot be trusted. But the question, he's not the only enemy. And the question becomes, you've got three forces that are on the nominal right with the rump Tories, what's left of them, Reform, Restore. And you can imagine a scenario where if you have some sort of a revitalized left or something, you're going to have these three factions. And that's not even counting all the other nationalist parties that are on the farther right. At some point, like, somebody actually has to put something together here. Is the solution to be a spoiler to try to force Farage to go farther? Or do you actually have to cut a kind of deal where you say, in a race like this, we are not going to run a guy because we don't want to let Labour win?
I think that what nationalists need to do is demand more. Now, this has always been my issue with nationalists, is we settle for less. Even in Restore, people are settling for less. I mean, there was literally a scandal about a guy called Scott Benton, who's some homosexual Zionist that has Baal tattooed on him in Hebrew, and he's in charge of the data regarding the Restore members. And I'm just like, that's crazy. Why is this person even here? And everyone's trying to make excuses for it. I'm like, we never demand more. And then they go on about the left gaining ground. I'm like, the left do demand more. I mean, look at the way they've gone from, being like tree huggers to like crazy radical trannies with this abundance of everybody's the exact same. That's happened in such a small amount of time because they just keep pushing against the needle as much as they can. Whereas, let's just go on the immigration basis. We said, we want immigration down to net zero. Now it's plummeting to about 100,000 at the minute, and people are going, okay, let's get it down to 10K. 10K is still 10,000 extra immigrants on top of all the other ones coming in. That's not good enough. And it's never been good enough. And we just settle for less. So I do think that in a way, Reform needs to be taught a lesson. And I try to say this with the local elections. I think they should have lost the local elections to Labour, because number one, what it would have done is not allow a by-election to be called. We would not be in this situation if people had gone with my plan of just let them be crushed. But in a way, now Restore needs to also deal with that situation and to be crossed, because it's like, look, it's not good enough. We're not doing enough. And especially to Rupert, it's how can you claim to be this nationalist party? And their second spokesperson, Charlie Downs, came out and said they are nationalists. If, number one, we're not sticking up for white people at this key moment to stick up for white people, if we're flirting with the idea of letting this half Pakistani man have a key role within Restore, if we are sitting there and saying that the party has no understanding of ethno-nationalism, it's like, how can we expect to be trusting you if you're not even sticking by the principles and your support base? I think that we need to demand more before we start thinking about alliances, because frankly, this is not good enough.
Do you think that reforms should be considered even more of an existential enemy then? Like, better that they lose in this case, better that Labor gets its shot? Because in some ways, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I mean, the Uniparty is in some ways an easier enemy to oppose, because it's a lot easier to be like, look, we're in this situation. We have this establishment. It's the Tories, it's Labor. It's the same thing you've already gotten before. Now it's time to trust like a real anti-establishment figure. You can imagine making that case a couple of years from now and it being kind of compelling. Whereas if you have different faces, different parties, even something like the Greens might be harder to oppose in some ways. I mean, remember the way Macron got in is, even though he was a product of the French establishment, it was a new party. And so they were able to sell him as like a new face with bold new ideas, when of course it's the same old thing. I mean, in some sense, Labor is sort of the enemy you want if you're trying to get like a mass movement.
I think there's a few things to that. I mean, we are moving in towards more of an Americanized kind of populist society here in Britain, whereas back in the day, it would be like, oh, I'm voting for the Conservatives because my family's always been blue. Right. Whereas it's like Keir Starmer's a wanker and Nigel Farage is like the stop the boats guy. It's like we're looking more towards the party leader compared to the actual party itself. People still don't know their local MP, but they know exactly who's leading their party. So I think in a way, yes, that is a correct analysis, that we are looking towards what could be beneficial in a few years' time with this big face that comes out and he's trying to oppose the establishment. I mean, you kind of saw that in America with Trump. He was kind of like the oh, we're going to drain the swamp, that kind of thing. He was seen as like the opposition to the mainstream that the Republican Party had been. But my key concern here in Britain, now, we are a lot smaller of a country, which means that our politics is a lot more condensed. And one key thing which allows for the Labour Party and the Conservative Party to continue to survive is the structural basis behind those parties. So we've got the Labour clubs, we've got the big donor parties, we've got the big, we've got, for example, every party's got like a Friends of Israel lobbyist group that works within them. There's many of those lobbyist groups that work within them. And because it's so much smaller and everything's more community-based, I mean, if you look at most of the councils, they will do like activities with their party members, and it's easier to go canvassing for all of them. I mean, I don't imagine you could imagine walking around an entire area in a state doing a canvassing within one day or so and then all going to the pub. But that happens here in Britain. People go out, they'll spend like 5-6 hours canvassing and then all go to the pub. There's that big understanding of community. So because people have this generational tie to being a Labour voter or a Conservative voter, I do think that a lot of people pass that on down to their kids. My entire family used to be, Conservative, and most of them still are, even though you've got reform and whatnot. I've managed to break away from the ties. But I think if you bring that back, you bring back that generational voting, it's going to be a lot harder, especially with the community basis that we have here and the structural basis, to actually get rid of that. And I think potentially people may begin to start rejecting populism when they realize that populism is going to get us nowhere because of the way that our political system actually functions.
Do you suspect that you're going to see the formation of purely ethnic-based political parties on the left? I mean, you have these independent Muslim MPs, and I know there's sort of like some fringe Muslim parties. I see them kind of crop up once in a while, but it's not like a real thing. I mean, they still mostly seem to be in the Greens, but this can't be sustained very long, because it seems to me that the thing that would really push the British people toward explicit ethno-nationalism is if you saw the Muslims actually doing an explicit ethno-nationalism. I mean, I've always said people tend to be right-wing for their own group, and you're left-wing when you're just trying to undermine a system that you're in but not really a part of. That seems to be why they're supporting the Green Party, but this seems to be a very temporary thing. How much longer until we start seeing like an explicit Muslim bloc, like under a unified label in Parliament? Right now, we've already kind of got that, but they're nominally independent.
Yeah, we actually do have this, which people aren't aware of. We have this on like a local level. So in Tower Hamlets, for example, and Whitechapel, you've got, I think it's called the Alliance Party, which is predominantly Muslims. You look at all their candidates, they're just like brown Pakistanis and Indians. They're, all wearing hijabs or whatnot, and they run on the basis of being Muslim because these areas have been demographically replaced. We are moving more towards that. And even with the formation of like the Workers' Party, sure, it was formed under George Galloway, even though, his children are all Muslim, his wife, all of that. But it was formed under George Galloway. If you look at his candidates, they are Muslims. It is a Muslim voter bloc. It's just under this nuance of being a workers' party and trying to reflect that of like the 1930s Labour. So we are already seeing it, and that is going to continue to grow, and that will continue to grow the more that we have a population which is continuously being replaced and people are looking towards their own ethnic group. And I've always said, it's only white people in the UK that are not racially conscious. We are the people that are not voting based on our identity. And this is why with a party like Restore, which is like, moving more towards a nativist kind of, you see like the old Indian guy in the back of like the branch meeting photos, but they always hide him at the back, which is quite funny. But like we're moving more towards that basis where people are voting for the white people. What we are going to struggle with though is a lot of the areas where they are predominantly white, they're all in like the suburbs, in the nice villages that have not been replaced. And these people, they think you can't even talk about race. They think, hey, what do you mean some Afghanistani men are going around raping and stabbing people? I've never seen a Mohammed in my life, because they're not aware of that thing. Then they go to the city and they go, oh, this is the shithole, and they wonder why it's a shithole. So I think that the more difficult thing is trying to make those people recognize it. But I think that if you did have Muslim voter blocks, it could maybe show them, hey, I know you're living in your like little green flowery bubble, but this is what's actually happening in the city. And we are seeing the independents, the brown people that are arguing for child marriage and cousin marriage in parliament settings, which is bizarre. But we are seeing these bubbles pop up. And I do think we're moving into a time where sectarianism is going to continue to increase. And I don't even think the Green Party are realizing, and a lot of the gays and the young white morons and the university educated people, I don't even think they realize. They just think, hey, we're all the same. And a very key video that I saw, actually, it was back in November last year in Whitechapel. I think UKIP held a protest, and you had this group, this swarm of Muslims marching through Tower Hamlets.
Yep.
You've got
I know exactly. Yep.
Yeah, the white liberal on the side, we're on the same side, and the Muslims like, no, we're not.
No, we're not.
Like, I don't think the people in the Green Party recognize they are not on the same side of you. They will kill you the second they get the chance to. They will just turn their backs on you.
We're on the same side with these guys. Like, I don't think you are, mate, to use the term that's used now. And it reminds me a lot of what happened with Iran. I mean, when you think of the Iranian Revolution, I mean, it was spearheaded by these like liberals in alliance with these theocrats. But then once the liberals were no longer of any use, they just got pushed aside at best. And you think to yourself, how can they not see this coming? But then there's sort of this deliberate blindness as core to their worldview. Because and this is the thing that makes me kind of terrified sometimes, is that it's not that they don't see it at some level. Jonathan Bowden has this line where he says, you could get like a normal person, and when it's safe, they'll complain to you about the problems everybody sees, but then they won't act any differently. And the reason for that, I think, is because if you actually recognize that you're being replaced in your country and this is going to have massive changes, well, you got to do a lot of stuff to prevent that. And that's kind of terrifying. Your life is going to change right away. It's so much easier to just pretend it's not going to happen and go to work and not really think about it too much. Is there a danger then that white people, especially white people who have a little bit to lose, people who have a bit of prosperity, people who live in these nice neighborhoods, that they're not going to wake up until it's too late? And what then is the plan for people like us to reach people like that?
Yeah, I mean, in the infamous words of Richard Tice, one of the key figures in Reform, he'll be long gone by then. Like, a lot of people have that mindset. They have the mindset of, it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to be here. I think that a lot of these people, especially the young people, because they have quite a selfish mindset regarding life itself, they see it from almost like a Diogenes point of view, where it's I exist and nothing else matters. Like this kind of like nihilistic point of view is they don't recognize, because they have nothing to live for. They're just living. anything. They don't have anything to pass on. They don't have anything further to care about. A lot of people, even on like the traditional left of the UK, they still have an ethnic understanding and a racial understanding. A lot of them have kids. A lot of them have long-term families. They recognize these things. Sure, you get, your grandkid ends up with a Pakistani woman for some reason, and then you're like, oh, but like that's a very rare case. But the vast majority of them still recognize we have to have a future for our kids. They will stand there and they'll say, well, we've got to look out for them. A lot of the young people don't care. They don't have kids. They don't have responsibilities. They don't have long-term careers. They're just thinking about, drugs, TikTok, sex, and very like short-term pleasurable activities. So I think that it may be too late for a few people because they like living in this fantasy land, because it is easier for them as well. I mean, the stresses of the modern day world, especially with all the expectations that people are meant to find, and especially the pressures on like women and stuff, where you've got to find a career, have a long-term career and whatnot. A lot of them don't like to think further about having kids. Even people in my own family I know have said like they don't want to have kids because they don't like the society we're in, so they're just going to leave it. And I'm like, that's the wrong mindset to have. You don't like the society we're in, so you should look to build a better society for the future. But people don't want to do that because it's difficult. They don't want to ruin their social groups. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to get in trouble for saying the wrong thing, because I mean, everything can be interpreted as miscommunication and offensive speech. Believe you me, I've been through all of that. It is not the most fun experiences, but it's like a lot of people, a lot of people don't want to deal with that. So the easy way out, it's almost like just hanging yourself slowly. It just goes, it doesn't really matter. So I'll just do whatever I want to do.
Well, you definitely see this desperation among Gen Z and everything else, especially in terms of money, in terms of relationships, in terms of just this nihilism in the culture and everything else. But to some extent, it's kind of an opportunity. I mean, if you're like an elder millennial like me, you're still tied to some dead forms that have long since passed. Like in my brain, it's still like, oh, America still exists because I remember the 90s and stuff like that. That's not the way things are. And one of the reasons that I think a lot of older nationalists are sort of shocked by how forthright and direct a lot of Gen Z commentators are is because my generation, especially like Jared Taylor's generation, you kind of have to like dance around some of these things. You have to just talk about things in a certain way. Gen Z, there's nothing to lose. So why not just charge the guns? And so, yeah, there are dangers with that, but there's also some pretty incredible opportunities in terms of being able to actually change things.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best examples I can give you is the old leader of the BNP, Nick Griffin. Now, me and Nick Griffin don't really see eye to eye, but I think that's a generational thing. He's kind of the opinion that it's too late to deal with demographic replacement. Right. And he says, like, we just have to find a way to coexist with each other. And then we've quite openly had like arguments on X before. We've gone, no, this is not the end. I was like, there are still enough British people to pull this back. My generation can recognize who we are. And I think that one thing that really benefits us is like when I was growing up in the 2016s, when I was in like high school for you, secondary school for me, I was seeing cancel culture and people being cancelled left, right, and center. And then when I got to my 20s and late teens, it was the end of cancel culture. And then all of a sudden there was this like societal shift where all these offensive jokes that were kind of like, oh, you can't say that, or you can't talk about this kind of immigration question and all of that. That was beginning to become more mainstream. I mean, with the rise of very like influential figures on the right and whatnot, the move away from like the neocon level is like my generation has now grown up with these people that are openly offensive, that will say like basically fuck you to the system. And I think that is a good thing. We need that kind of language. We're not politicians. We're not here to be the mainstream. We're not here to be the status quo. And one of my favorite things to say is I'm not here to join the status quo. I never joined politics to be the status quo. I came to rewrite it. I want to rewrite it. I want to give my people, my generation, my future generations, a different society than the one that I have experienced through my childhood. So I do think that you are seeing this shift now with Gen Z where we just don't care. We do not care about the consequences. We do not care about what we are told, what we can and can't say. We just want our country back, our future back, and the chance to live what all of our grandparents and parents got to live. We've never had that experience, and we want it now.
Yeah. I mean, you basically, and the fact that it was done on purpose. I mean, one of the things I was talking about before we did the interview here was that famous Telegraph article where they said that the Blair government did mass immigration to rub the right's nose in diversity. The fact that this really was a deliberate plan, you think to yourself, it can't really be that simple, right? And it's like, no, it actually is. I mean, that fuels a kind of righteous anger. I mean, again, Farage, I know he's trying to be opportunistic, but I thought it was pretty revealing that he said the reaction actually should be rage, and all these people are attacking him for it. But that's when you've been wronged, that actually is the correct response. Like, it is actually okay to be mad when somebody has wronged you, especially because moral self-righteousness is really the only way to get anything done in politics.
Yeah, I mean, if let's just put it on this kind of basis, right? If somebody was to harm one of your family members, you would be rightly pissed off at that person. And on a racial basis, these people are our family. They are our brothers and sisters. This Indian invader, he's not my brother. He's not part of my family. He shouldn't be here. Henry Nowak is much more aligned to my European ancestry. His mum was an English woman. It's like they have my lineage. They have my ancestral connections. He is my brother. And then to watch an invader, a stranger in my lands, take his life from him. And I think what makes it worse is, again, the suicide empathy, the way that the police react to it. The white police officers slam the other white guy to the floor because the brown guy stood in the doorway going, he was racist to me. And what makes it worse is the way they tell Henry, oh, I don't think you have been stabbed, mate. Like, basically shut up and die, whilst going over to the brown guy going, are you okay? Are you okay? Watching that, of course I'm going to be angry. Of course the reaction is anger. And what we keep seeing is the government likes to blame the reaction of the British people instead of the systems which have led to these reactions. These reactions are the symptom of a disease, and that disease is the demographic replacement, the anti-white hatred. And again, it is rubbing it in our noses. The policies like DEI is rubbing it in our noses that we need to accept these people as the same as us. No, the idea that we all have a passport and then it goes, oh, it's fine, they were born here, they have a passport, that is rubbing it on our nose. You need to accept it. No, I mean, the woman that actually put forward the open borders under Tony Blair is a woman called Barbara Roach. She's a Jewish woman that has a mixed ethnic background, and she quite openly said that the reason she is so fond of a multi-ethnic society is because of who she is. It's like, you're not the same as us and you're trying to force that onto us. We are rejecting that. So yes, we are pissed off because we're being told by people that are not from here, that are not the same as us, that we must accept them as us. No, absolutely not. You would not say that to somebody trying to like squat in your house or join your family.
Right. All politics are identity politics, as many are saying. I mean, it really does seem to be that it's just everybody else coming in with an ethnic agenda, everybody coming to pursue their own ethnic interests. And for some reason, the white English people are the one group that's not allowed. But of course, part of that is because the nationalist movement, if we can, I can be forgiven for using that term, has put up leaders or is supported by people who may be trying to misdirect it. And of course, one of the most controversial is Tommy Robinson. Now, on the one hand, this is a guy who Elon Musk promotes a lot. Elon Musk has been saying a lot about the Nowak case and everything. And he's organized these big rallies. That does count for something. The fact that you have these people showing up to show the opposition to the regime, that's not nothing. But I think we all know Tommy Robinson's issues, and we all know that he is trying to muddy the waters with a lot of these things, specifically saying that it's really just about Islam. That's the only thing we really need to be worried about. Now, one thing about this case, not that there's really a silver lining, but something that might be a positive consequence of this tragedy, is that this is now a Sikh. And Tommy Robinson has been overflowing in his praise of the Sikhs, saying that they're just as British as everybody else and they're assimilating and they're integrating. And I wouldn't even care, there's a quote, I wouldn't even care if Sikhs outnumbered people in this town because it would still be British. Well, one of the things we learned is not just that you had this murder, but that the family instantly moved to cover it up and instantly moved to start lying to law enforcement and basically operating in a way that is entirely foreign to the rest of us. Do you think that Tommy Robinson's days are basically done? Because this seems like a real blow to his whole concept and this whole counter-jihad movement, which at this point is like 20 years old, where we just sort of pretend it's just about Islam. And that's the only thing we need to worry about.
Yeah, I think Tommy's been on a downward trajectory now for quite a while. What we've seen is a lot of people like me calling him out. I mean, to the point where he's quite openly on Twitter threatening to knock me out, knock Steve Laws out, calling me a Nazi mong. He just says this openly. Like, we understand he's on a coke rant, but it's like, calm down, little man. So, like, I think, yes, this is a big blow to him because, I mean, look what he did with the Rotherham rape gangs. He said it was entire communities working together, covering it up because they're not the same as us and fundamentally they'll never be the same as us. Now, when we see with a Sikh family doing the exact same thing, who know they're not the same as us, they'll never be the same as us, so they look out for their own, he's trying to make excuses about it, saying, well, majority of Sikhs are fine and whatnot. the key takeaway here is no matter what he tries to tell you, no matter how many brown people he has on stage doing the hacker and singing like horrible songs which are completely out of tune, they will never be the same as us. And they know that. So I do think Tommy's had a very, very bad time recently trying to say, well, they're all British. But what can you expect from the same man that can't even define what an English person is? He goes on about demographic replacement and, we need to look after the white Brits. But then he calls his black friend English. I'm really sorry. Tyrone will never be English. There is nothing English about him. So he has tried to subvert the nationalist movement for the longest time to just be about Islam. I mean, I was even seeing people put faces up of this Digwa guy and going, this is the face of Islam in Britain.
I saw that too. It was incredible. I mean, you saw this in America. I remember even after, ancient history, but even after 9/11, you would see people going after Sikhs and stuff saying like it's Islam. And it's like, it's not. It's a racial thing more than a religion thing. But for some reason, there's just it's just much easier to say, oh, it's Islam, it's Muslims, it's everything else. And it's not just because that's allowed to some extent, although I think that's a bit overstated that it's allowed, but it's also because then we're discussing ideas. Because in theory, you can go to a Muslim and just be like, well, stop being Muslim. And he goes, okay, I'm a Catholic now or whatever. And now there's no problem. And a lot of people want to believe that's the way it works, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of subversion of all of these things, and it's a dumbing down. And nicely, most people are quite stupid, so they just fall for it because they see a brown person on the street and they just go Muslim. I mean, you've seen the thing with the boats. People go, oh, the amount of illegal migrants here. I guarantee you, the average person walks down the street, sees like an increase in foreign faces, and will probably think they're all illegals. Newsflash: 99% of them are illegal. They are all here legally. And a lot of the people coming over on the boats, they're coming from like Northern Africa. A lot of these are Christian countries. These people are not all Muslims. The key consensus is that they are all foreign. So what they've tried to do is use Islam, use the illegal migrants to try and push forward this message of, don't worry, guys, it's just this legality and it's just Islam itself. When if you look at the UK population, 6% of the UK population is actually Muslim, whereas 30% of the UK population is foreign. That's 24% of people that are not accounted for in this arch of just being Islamic. What the actual problem is, and what Tommy still won't admit, because he doesn't want to lose his funding, because he is a mouthpiece to try and subvert the nationalists, is it is everybody that is not part of our tribe. And until we have the ability to step over him, and we are beginning to do that. I mean, if you look at the numbers from his last UTK rally to the one that he's just done, they were massively down. We are beginning to do that. And I think this has really impacted him, and it should impact him. And we should not let him have a chance to breathe. Unironically, and I don't mean this is a pun, but we should keep our knee on his neck. We should keep him down because he needs to be removed from that key figure of the He doesn't even live in England. He lives in Spain. This guy's nowhere near us. I'm like, what is this guy on about? But I think it is really hard.
Well, we know what he's on. I mean, I think everybody knows that.
Very true.
It's not exactly a secret. The one thing, though, that makes me worried, especially just from actually, I was gonna, I think it was it Steve Laws who we were gonna have on? I think it was Steve, where he couldn't make the show, and we said, oh, well, he can't make the show. Wonder what happened. And I said kind of jokingly, well, it's the United Kingdom. He probably got arrested or something. And then like a day or two goes by, and it's like, yeah, I got arrested. We joke here in America, like dark jokes about how bad it is in the UK, but then you see like what the Prime Minister was just saying, and it's like it could be so much worse. And you get the feeling of what else do they have at this point other than just naked repression? I mean, there's no First Amendment. They seem to be willing to use any amount of technology. They let non-whites get away with anything, but they are willing to go to the mat for stuff people say online, but especially with these sort of unruly protests that you saw yesterday, they're going to look to make examples out of people. I know people say this kind of thing. I don't want to be excitable or engage in hyperbole and everything else, but to a lot of Americans, the situation in the UK seems like a Orwellian nightmare in terms of government abuse. Do you worry that it hasn't even begun yet, that the Labour government in desperation is just going to start cracking down in a way that we haven't even seen before? Because looking at the mainstream media reaction to these protests yesterday, if anything, they're mad that the protesters weren't punished enough.
Yeah, it's dire. I'll say that it's very dire. I mean, I've been through the process of the police being mad about.
Yeah, I don't want to get you arrested. I mean, I
yeah, don't worry. I'm not gonna throw anything out there that's gonna get me in major trouble. But I mean, I literally had an infamous video where the police rang me and were like, "You tweeted the letter N." I was like, "What?" I was like, "What's that got to do with you?" And it was an Indian guy on the phone as well. But like, this is kind of like the situation we have where, yes, it is dire, and yes, it could get worse. I mean, quite openly, the left-wing parties, the Green Party, are saying on interviews that they would like to build a society without right-wing people. Let's not hide that. What they mean is they want to put you in jail and tell you to leave them alone and build a society without you. You will become an oppressed group because of what you believe, your ideology and your rhetoric. And I think they are going to make a very big example out of some people at the protest from yesterday. What we're already seeing is they're talking about Palantir facial recognition to find out who these people are, link it back to their social media use, and then try and find out if, you know, they have a history of tweeting anti-immigration slogans and stuff like that. It is going to be used to make an example out of quite a bit of people. And that is a big fear because it's just easy kettling exercise. They use these protests to kettle you, and it's like the valve. They're taking the valve off. You get mad. You throw some plant pots at police officers or roll a bin on fire at them, and then they'll knock on your door a month later, and you'll be serving 2 years behind bars. And they will monitor social media, and we already know that they watch a lot of these live streams as well. And what really is starting to piss us off over here is all these auditors that walk around these live streams, these protests live streaming and capturing everybody's face so they can earn some money for it. It's like, you people are scumbags. You are quite literally giving the government what they want, which is surveillance, civilian surveillance on the ground, 4K quality, so you can earn what? 50, 100, 200 quid for a few hours of walking around a protest. It is diabolical. But again, this is the society we're building. We're building this short-term, individualistic, selfish society. And that's why the British people have been subverted for so long.
Yeah, say what you will about the Antifa, but at least the Antifa know not to film your own guys when you're protesting the government. One thing that I guess this is the obvious aftermath to that is there any value in these kinds of protests then? Because on the one hand, they're obviously organic in some sense. I mean, these were just local people who were mad. You heard them shouting at the cops. I thought probably the most revealing chant of the whole thing was when they were saying, on your knees, which I thought was pretty powerful because, I mean, the British police, even though it didn't happen in your country, were taking a knee for George Floyd. The Prime Minister took a knee for George Floyd. It has nothing to do with the UK, but they still took a knee for that. Meanwhile, you have these cops in the town where this happened, and they just look at him with contempt and then eventually start wailing on him later. So there is value in doing that. But as you say, to some extent, is this what they want? Because this is the opportunity to sort of round up the troublemakers and get them out of action for a year, 2 years, 3 years, especially with these new government regulations where they don't even have to give you a jury trial anymore.
Yeah, I think this is what I have been trying to get across to people. And I know in my video yesterday, I was like, you know, we need that fury. And I made the point at the end is I'm not on about violence or riots. I'm not on about altercations or terrorism. What I'm on about is genuine political change. And as we were talking about earlier, sectarianism, that comes from anger. It comes from this fear that we are about to go extinct. Let's be honest. They hate white people. They want us dead. They want us extinct. That is the key issue here. You can get angry and shout at all of these white police officers about, you know, not taking the knee. That's not going to lead to change. We're still going to lose power to these foreigners in government, and they will just kill us. What we need is to redirect our anger to vote for white people. We need it to put forward policy, government, a structure that saves white people. This is what people are failing to recognize. They stand there and they're on the street, and I heard this yesterday, white man fight back. There is nothing you can do against this tyrannical government that has technology 30 years ahead of you that can track exactly where you are, track you using your phone and your GPS, track your faces, lock you up for years at a time without a jury trial behind it. Most people end up pleading guilty anyway out of fear. Right. They will use every power against you to silence you. What we need to do to remove that power is take the power politically. If we can tribalize, finally start, instead of saying white man fight back as a physical altercation, but white man fight back politically, vote on white people for white people. That is what everybody else is doing. That is what the blacks do. That is what the Asians do. That is what the Muslims do. We need to do it. That is how you move forward. It's great saying, oh, we need a revolution. With what? We have no guns. We have no ability. We're not very trained up. Most people here are very unhealthy and not fighters themselves. You need political power. We need political power. We cannot go down this route of, we're going to have a revolution. This is not the Guy Fawkes era anymore. You're not going to go under Parliament and put barrels of dynamite and TNT and gunpowder. That's not where we're at. Where we're at is we have this chance right now, our last chance politically, to have tribalism, to have nativism, to have the white people take back power. That's what we need.
And certainly there seems to be a consensus on the continent. My boss, Jared Taylor, was there at the Remigration Summit that just occurred in Portugal. And one of the things that's exciting about this, and they just started that Institute for Remigration and everything else, is we're getting real proposals about how this could be done. I mean, remigration, okay, that's a word. What does that actually mean? Well, here's a bunch of things we can do. And at the end of your speech yesterday, I mean, you talked about some of those things. It's not just a question of kicking in the doors and rounding them up and throwing them in the back of a truck and then they leave, although you can imagine having to do that sometimes. That's not how you're going to get most people to leave. I mean, ideally, most people just leave because they realize they're not welcome anymore. And one of the things you talked about was creating a hostile climate. But what does that mean exactly? Because I think a lot of people would be interested to know, okay, you've gotten some state power. You're not a dictator. You know, you got elected. You've got the system as it is. What are the things that you can do realistically to start actually executing remigration?
Yeah, well, I actually met Jared Taylor the other day. Very lovely bloke. Very very lovely. We had a good conversation. But what I think we can do politically is, number one, removal of benefits. We already know that a lot of these people do not work. For example, I think it's like 93% of Somalians in the UK do not work. There's no need for them to be here. Take off their benefits and they'll go back home. A lot of them already know they're not welcome. This is the thing. People go on about, oh, we need to make them feel like they're not welcome. A lot of them know they're not welcome. The entire point of raising the flag, and we had all this backlash from the government of saying, you're using it as a symbol of hate and division. The honest breakdown of that is Africans just know it's not their flag, so they know it's not for them to be here. They already know they shouldn't be here. What doesn't help is the government does not go through that motto of you shouldn't be here. Instead, they give them welfare, they give them specialized programs in healthcare and allow them to, you know, basically sit on the government. If we were to start removing those programs, and what people don't recognize is remigration is not, you know, one night everyone gets rounded up and lobbed on a cargo ship back over to Ongo Bongo land somewhere, but it's a long, steady process of policy, maybe over a decade or two, that removes their benefits. It makes them understand that their religious practices are not welcome here. They're banned from it. I do not believe in freedom of religion in our country. Why should we allow for...
You have a state church. You have a state church. You don't even need to pretend with that. I mean, you already have a state church.
I mean, the king's supposed to be the defender of the faith, but he does everything but defend the faith. It's like he should be defending the faith. We should be banning these barbaric religions and these demonic religions that shouldn't be here. We should be banning their practices and banning their welfare and removing their citizenship. We can do that. I don't know why no one talks about this. We can. It's called denaturalization. We are able to do that. In fact, Shabana Mahmood, who's our Pakistani Home Secretary, she did it to a white guy that's living in Russia. Now, this guy is an ethnic Brit. His family has hundreds of years of ties here. She removed his citizenship over fears of his connections to the Russian government with no evidence. It is possible. If the Pakistani Home Secretary can do that to one white guy in Russia, a white Home Secretary can do that to thousands of brown people in this country and send them back home. There are deals you can make with these countries, because one thing that I've not seen anybody mention for some reason is a lot of the people born here are giving education and skills at a much higher level at their home country, their homeland. If you were to offer, for example, Pakistan 2 million Pakistanis back, these Pakistanis have Western education, Western values, they've been brought up around our culture, they're more advanced in their hometown, their home state. I guarantee you Pakistan want these higher productive individuals back compared to the slummy people they have there, even though they're not on the same level as us, because of course there are racial differences behind, you know, development and our ability to prosper in these societies. They are still more advanced than those that are just born in Pakistan. So there are many things we can do about that economically, diplomatically, socially, welfare. There are many things we can do about that. It's not just kick down their doors, kick them out.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the great things is that this is not something that's just happening in one place. I mean, it seems like all the different nationalist movements on the continent are getting behind this agenda. Obviously, I mean, if I had to pick, and I don't think it's a coincidence because that's where Sellner's from, if I had to pick one country that I think is probably the closest where you're going to see a party actually take power, probably Austria. But I mean, you're seeing it in a lot of different places. Where's your read where the UK movement is compared to the rest of the continent? Because in some ways, for a long time, I mean, and I'll freely admit this, and it's just kind of the American arrogance. A lot of times people be, well, the British are just cooked. I mean, there's nothing going on there. Now, I would say that I think a lot of Americans are pretty envious of what's going on in the British scene because it's come so far in just the last few years. But where do you stand compared to France, Germany, and all these other places? Because I've always been of the opinion that we're either going to win everywhere or we're not going to win at all.
Yeah, I think that one benefit we do have is being an island nation as well. I think that because we are cut off from the rest of Europe, we have this specific sense of self-pride. A lot of people here don't even view themselves as Europeans. They view themselves as Englishmen, Scotsmen, Welshmen. They view themselves as Anglos and Celts. So I think that we do have that immense amount of self-pride. And I think that when people look at England and the Americans go, you're cooked, and they look at England, they look at the South, they look at places like London. London is cooked, and I'm not going to lie about that. But what they fail to recognize is our countryside is white. They fail to look at places like Scotland. And Scotland, although Glasgow and the south of Scotland is quite left-wing and liberal, what you actually, if you pay attention to the Highlands, they are extremely nationalistic. They are, very much so. We will get rid of any foreigner in these areas. I know of multiple people that live in the Highlands, and they refer to blacks as darkies, and they don't want them in their areas. And they are very much of the notion of, we are a people, you are not coming here. So I think that although we have struggles in our major cities, and that's where the migrants are based out in, we still have the bastions of the countryside. The UK has a very strong chance, especially if we can grow this racial consciousness. If we can grow it into the countryside, that's where the strength is. That's where the people are. That's where the traditional values still lie. If we can grow that higher into Scotland and have this alliance with the Scottish, with the Northern Irish, people forget the Troubles as well. Look at the response of the Northern Irish and the Troubles. Now imagine that response across the UK to an invasion of foreigners. We are an aggressive force of people. We always have been. We've just been pushed down for a long time. So I think that what you saw yesterday in Southampton is a very, very small glimpse into the anger, the fury, and the passion of the British people, the Scottish, the Welsh, the Northern Irish, the English. That is a very, very small glimpse into the passion. And I think that although we have been cooked for a long time with the appearance of Brexit and all the foreign mayors being brought up and everyone going, haha, look, you're just being replaced. What they fail to recognize is real England, real British people, they don't play around. They don't like these people around us, and they will turn a tide eventually. And I'm not going to speculate where that'll go because I'm not getting in trouble with the law, but they will turn a tide eventually where they will have enough and they will take matters into their own hands.
Yeah, you actually anticipated the next thing I was going to say. And again, without saying anything to get you in trouble, but one of the terms, and this was tossed around by a lot of different British journalists and American journalists commenting on the British scene, is this phenomenon of Ulsterization is the term they use. And you especially see it where these Muslim neighborhoods, they'll put up the Palestine flag. And the Palestine flag, it's not even so much about the way they use it. I mean, Zionism or Israel so much as anything else, but it's more like, this is our turf. That's what it actually means in terms of the way they're using it in that place. And then, of course, you had the Raise the Colors where you would have the UK flag or even just the English flag going up at different places. And you can sort of imagine this being taken to a sort of Northern Ireland type situation where this neighborhood belongs to this group and this flag is quite literally flying there, and that tells you whose turf this is. And you can even imagine sort of barriers and murals and God knows what else of the sort that you saw in Northern Ireland. And the role of the UK government seems to be almost this quasi-imperial approach of we're sort of the referee between these sort of different communities. And when there's a problem, we'd bring in the community leaders and we kind of talk them down from the ledge and whatever else. But of course, the whites themselves, I mean, who's the community leader for whites? There never seems to be one. Do you see Ulsterization as a valid phenomenon? Because one of the reasons, and again, I'm not trying to lead it into an unproductive direction, but if I had to think of one country that is most on the brink, so to speak, where things could get a little haywire, I'd probably say the UK, because it's just so divided in a way that you don't see with other European countries.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely is like turf wars. It's kind of like, we're in like Detroit or something. You got like the red Cribs versus the purple Cribs. It's like we are seeing that. And I think that we are seeing this phenomenon, especially in England, Scotland, even Ireland. I mean, Ireland in Dublin, they were like spray painting on the side of buildings, like Irish people only in houses. And if the council moved somebody in that was not Irish, they would smash the windows of it. That is a form of the hostile environment. That's not the one that I'm like, promoting.
Right. Obviously.
But that is something that is going to continue to increase. And as we keep saying, remigration is the moderate option. We would like to avoid this ulcerization of like segregated communities that are starting turf wars with one another. We just want these communities to go back home. And the fear is the more you allow it to grow and the more that you allow the foreign communities who show a strength of force, and it's them that do it, that they show this strength of force, marching down Tower Hamlet, carrying daggers on the street, quite openly saying, we are here to replace you. We need more Muslims. I mean, the Labour leader in Scotland was quite openly bragging about they need more Southeast Asian men there. They need them more in power. They need that representation. It's like they are the ones that are showing power. The white British people have not been showing power for a long time. And I think a lot of people are beginning to say, enough is enough. We are going to show you power back. And if the government wants to avoid that, they need to start looking at our solutions that we are trying to push forward as the moderate voice and say, let's get these people back politically before we enter a land of the unknown. And we don't want that. We want this to be, we've suffered enough. We have suffered enough here in Britain. We don't want to suffer more. Let's just remove these people in the safest, most civilized way we possibly can before we enter a situation that none of us are ready for.
One more quick question before I get into the last thing I want to discuss, which is, it sounds a little separate, but it's really not, which is, of course, the economic question. As we've talked about, Gen Z, one of the biggest things is affordability, at least in America. People have just totally given up on the idea of like getting to have a house or having a family. Like that's just not something you get to do if you're under 30. I mean, that's how a lot of people think of it. And it seems to me that seems to be the situation in Europe as well and in the UK as well. But then you still, because the patriotic movements are still on the right, broadly defined, you still have this kind of attachment to Thatcherism, maybe a bit too catch-all, but let's call it that. These sort of economic policies that, at least to a lot of young people, it doesn't really excite them. They don't feel like they're getting anything out of it. Do you worry that the remigration agenda could suffer? Especially because, what you're talking about is winning elections, getting power, and you can't just talk about immigration to win an election. You're going to have to talk about things like healthcare and housing and everything else that we're basically handicapped because we're also wedded, at least it seems on the right and the Anglophone right, to an economic agenda that's just not doing it for 20-something and 30-something voters.
Yeah, a lot of the parties that keep getting promoted, even like Restore, they're offering like, individual liberalism when it comes to economics. That is just Thatcherite economics. You can't even begin to have a system that does not need immigration if you're still relying on the global markets, if you're still allowing these trans multinational corporations to come over and want the cheap labor. That is what it is. They've always wanted to keep wages low at the expense of the British people, which means they're going to import the third world. So I do think that we are beginning to move towards a lot more of a system where people almost want a kind of socialized economic system, not socialism of the 1930s, 1920s. Right. I think what people failed to recognize when they go, I'm a socialist, it's like, well, what means of production?
What does that mean? Yeah, right.
We're a service-based economy. What kind of means of production are you going to own? It's like, are you owning the computers and like, the Excel sheets? It's just like, it's ridiculous. It's like, we need to move in an economic system which looks at reindustrialization. I think that's very important. Moves away from this increased service-based economy because it's not teaching people skills. It's not teaching people labor and grafting. It's just teaching people how to sit in front of a computer. I think the British people would much benefit from having a physical skill they can do, being able to understand how to put forward physical labor, being a landscaper, working on like steel plants, something like that is beneficial to them. That makes the value of your labor a lot higher as well. You wonder why people are so unproductive and like don't want to go to work and all rely on benefits. We have a welfare system that just relies on, I'm depressed or I'm anxious or whatnot. No wonder people are depressed. You're telling them, go sit in front of a computer for like 8 hours a day and deal with it. Of course they're depressed. They want to get out there and do something else. So I think that economically, yes, these parties suck, and we can't just rely on immigration. I get immigration is kind of like the religion of British politics and Western politics, but we cannot rely on just immigration because at some point people are going to say, well, immigration's fine, and I'm glad that my town's not going to be demographically replaced, but I need to earn a living. I need a career. I need some kind of like financial stability. We don't really want this economic system which appeals just to the boomers and the pensioners anymore. I want to buy a house. I can't think of anybody my age that can afford to buy a house. And we want those systems, and immigration plays a factor into that. Easy economic formulas of supply and demand. I mean, even the White Paper Institute came out and said that only white people in the UK are economic net benefits when it comes to like taxation and stuff. It's like, we know that immigration plays a factor into this. But also, if we're going to move away from a system which relies on immigration, we need to start putting plans forward for reindustrialization, remilitarization, nationalization of certain industries that will allow the British people to have financial security and be able to build up their own business.
Yeah, and I think that would be a compelling message to the kind of voters that you need to win over, who aren't just going to come across on immigration. You can imagine a tragic scenario where the Greens win them over just by offering them stuff, and then it ends up just furthering the decline. That's always been my nightmare. One last question is regarding the special relationship, so to speak, between the United States and the mother country. Obviously, we remember, and I took a great deal of satisfaction at the time when Vice President J.D. Vance went over and scolded the Prime Minister of the UK, basically saying, look, you got to allow free speech and you got to stop arresting people. And Starmer said, no, we have free speech. And everybody said, no, you don't. No, you don't, and just made fun of him. But the problem, of course, is people don't like it when a foreign head of state, particularly our head of state, comes in and starts pushing around other countries' leaders and telling them what to do. And in a weird way, it creates this sort of, even people who aren't particularly patriotic and don't even like the country, they still do this kind of rally around the flag effect, where they go to their leaders and say, no, he's representing us, don't tell us what to do. You see the same thing in Canada, where the president constantly hinting that we're going to annex them one of these days, and it actually seems to be helping the left-wing government up there. So it's a delicate question. What can Americans do to help these efforts, even in terms of promoting it or something like that? Or is, frankly, the best thing we can do is just shut up and send our solidarity? Because if we try to get involved, we're just going to make things worse.
Yeah, in a blunt terms, I think shutting up is a good idea. I think that what we usually see, as you briefed on it earlier, is like the whole idea of, oh, the UK's cooked. I mean, I see all these comments online. It's like, your country's cooked. And I'm like, you guys are 50%.
We're all cooked.
Why?
We're all cooked. Have you seen, I mean, here's the thing. Have you seen New York? Have you seen LA? Have you seen Chicago? I mean, none of us are really doing all that well. We're all in a pretty bad situation, backs to the wall. I don't think any of us are in a place to brag right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is a lot of you guys, you're all brothers. You are Anglos as well. I mean, America is made of like Anglos. It was made of our bloodline. A lot of people there have connections to my land. It's like we are all in the same fight. You guys are more closely related to us than the invaders that are coming over to your country, coming over to my country. We are all much more aligned with one another. I think what suffers with America, especially since the Iraq war, is the continuous wars in the Middle East, which we have seen to be dragged into. And one thing that's really started to fracture the special relationship is the current war in Iran. Now, obviously, Starmer's taken this approach of, we are not joining in, we are not going to go on the offensive, we will go on the defensive against our bases in like Cyprus and whatnot, but we're not going to join in the strikes. And obviously, you saw Trump getting up in arms about that, saying like he's a weak leader, he's not a Churchill, he's not, trying to help us anymore, it's going to suffer the relationship. But a lot of Brits are not a fan of that. The consensus here is we don't actually want to join in your war. And a lot of the nationalists as well, we do begin to have this contention against America and go, we're not interested. Like, I'm a British nationalist. I care about what's in the best interest of Britain. I'm sorry if, you've started a war in Iran or whatnot, and you say, well, we need your help. But I'm like, if that's sort of the best interest of my people here, if that's going to create conflict here, why should we sit there and say, oh, okay, we'll join in with you? And then we get all these Americans, ankle biting us saying, you guys are just weak. You guys are just weak. And I'm like, we just don't want to join in the war. So I think that a degree of shutting up is beneficial for the future of our countries. But I think the main concern is we are both on a track to become extinct in our own nations. That is the bad thing. That is what we should be focusing on. And we should be sending each other our solidarities, because we have a long, long fight ahead of us. And I don't really think JD was wrong about saying about free speech, because free speech allows me and people that I know to get our message out in this country without being arrested. As you mentioned earlier, Steve Laws, like, I know Steve very well as a person. He's been arrested multiple times for saying things. He's even dealing with a court case now where he'll be in court on the 23rd of June. It's like, this is a real issue. So I think that there are certain issues which you guys can stick your nose in, so to speak, but other issues where it's just like, shut up, leave us alone.
Right. Yeah, the one thing that I think I would give the Trump administration credit for, and not a lot of people know this, is how active the State Department has been in sort of pushing some of the European countries to stop arresting people and not ban certain political parties. I think we are doing some good there. It's just with everything else, we might be doing more harm than good. But I'm pretty, yes. But I'm very optimistic about what's happening in Britain. I'm very optimistic about the way your show has taken off and what you had to say and all these different parties that are coming up and everything else. Is there anything you want to close with in terms of what people in America should know about where this is going? Because again, a couple of years back, I think people here were very defeatist about the United Kingdom. But frankly, I think a lot of us are envious of what you guys got going on right now.
Yeah, I think that the message I'd end on is the British people are not as weak as we're made out to be. We've never been weak. We have never, ever faltered. And one of the most infamous quotes of a British nationalist is England lives and marches on. And frankly, it does. It does live and it marches on because the English people continue to brave. We continue to fight back. And although we may have been cooked in multiple different regions here, the average British person is not cooked. They are very strong. They are hot-headed and they want their country back. So don't count us out yet. We are still going. We may be across the pond. We may be a little country, but we are still going and we will still carry on. And the fact that people like me, who a few years ago would have been completely counted, I'd probably be in a jail cell somewhere a few years ago here in Britain. But now I'm like, I can do my show. I can say my things. And okay, I get a little bit of, backlash from the police and the legal system. But as a whole, they do somewhat leave me alone. I have to be careful, but they do somewhat leave me alone. The fact that I'm able to do that and people like me are able to do that, we're able to talk about our identity. Britain is back on the rise. Britannia is living again, and we will rule the waves, and that's the most important thing.
Well, if there's one thing we know about the Anglos, is at their best when their back's to the wall. So I think the best years are ahead. You're doing a great job. Where can people find you, and how can people support you?
You can find me on X at the Hugh Anthony and like every other platform, Kick, Rumble, YouTube. That's mainly where I do my show at Hugh Anthony. You can find there are links for supporting me. You can donate to the show. Everything goes back into keeping up my activism and making sure that I can keep bringing the actual message to the British people and fighting for a future for our people and our survival against our dire invasion.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate all your efforts. And I do think you guys are going to win in the end. As will
we will win. Of course. Thank you very much, Kevin.
So President Donald Trump and our beloved leader seems to be going over more to boomer posting more and more often these days. A very lengthy post on Truth Social. He said the following. I'm only going to read a small part of it. Donald J. Trump said the following: I recently signed a powerful new executive order, which will be led by the Treasury Department to stop banks, credit cards, and financial institutions from being used to facilitate human smuggling, drug trafficking, illegal immigration, and the criminal cartels who orchestrate these activities. Access to our nation's financial systems must be limited to those who have a legal right to be here and who are engaged in lawful and legitimate commerce. Bank accounts being used to enable illegal immigration or to store the welfare received by illegal aliens will be shut down, and funds will ultimately face impoundment and seizure so they can be returned to taxpayers. It is not ludicrous, but profoundly dangerous that any illegal alien can simply present a blue state driver's license or Biden border document and have unrestricted access to the U.S. financial system. This also sends a clear message to the anti-ICE rioters that your violent disruptions are only strengthening our resolve, unquote. Now, this is obviously a very good thing. This is something that could make a real difference if it actually goes through, if the courts allow it and everything else. But this is also something that could have been done a long time ago. This could have been done day one. This could have been done in the first term. This could have been done for remittances. It is being done, and that's not nothing. And really, this is where the battle for remigration is going to focus in the long term. It's not going to be just kicking in doors. It's going to be some of that, but not as much as people think. Because why? These people are here from money. And they're being brought in by people who make money off of it. And if you make it costly, a lot of them are going to go away. Financial regulations, banking regulations, seizing funds, if you can do it, giving taxpayers a bounty on this kind of thing, which is what I would do, give normal people a financial stake in remigration. This is how you can actually pull this off. But of course, that means you got to confront the financial sector. You got to be willing to impose some costs. And the Republicans, of all people, do not have a great track record of doing this. Neither does Trump, frankly. The bigger issue is that some will say, well, everyone should have access to the financial system. It's not about politics. It's a universal right. No, come on. Come on, guys. We're past that. I'm sure some of you guys have had to deal with this. American Renaissance couldn't do that for years. That only changed with the new administration. And when that changes, I assume we're not going to be able to operate this way anymore. I know a lot of you guys go through the same thing. I can't even name how many banks Martin Sellner's been banned from. We are past the point where you can talk about universal rights or entitlements or rights that everybody has. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a question of who has power on their side. But for so long, we just assumed it can never be us. We're always going to be persecuted. We're always going to lose. Oh, get ready. No, this is the wrong way to think about it. It has to be us. We have to expect it to be us. And actions like this, late and half-hearted as it is, do help, but we need more. Go after the money, and you won't even need the optics of ICE raids and whatever else. You're still going to have to confront the left. The big business will go down, but you have to be willing to do it. You need to impose some short-term costs on the Chamber of Commerce. And Capitol may be a coward, but the Republicans are worse. Too cowardly to fight, too fat to run. But if you just do it, with no negotiation, they will submit. And we won't have to worry about it anymore. And the first guy on the right who gets that is going to put on that crown that's lying in the gutter. I'm Kevin DeAnna. We'll talk again real soon. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.